Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another rules breakdown, and this time I'm going to be covering Top Secret from TSR in 1980. Now this is a very early role-playing game, and like many role-playing games from this very early period, the rules in this aren't really unified. Everything tends to have its own different rules, as we saw when we covered Bunnies and Burrows a few months ago, from roughly the same time period. But in this, it means that conning someone is going to work differently to picking a lock, to kicking a door in. They're all going to have slightly different rules, and I can't cover all of those, so I will be covering the most general rules and making suggestions on ways of handling things fairly quickly. And combat works the same way, where using guns and melee combat work in completely different fashion. So I'll cover using guns, because that's probably what you're going to do most of the time, as it's more deadly. But I'll briefly look at the melee combat as well. But anyway, let's have a look at Top Secret. So, skills. Well, Top Secret doesn't really have any skills. But basically when you're attempting most things, you're using a set of derived traits. If we go to page 5 of the rulebook, we can see we've got personal traits. Now these are the things you roll up during character creation. So physical strength, charm, willpower, courage, knowledge and coordination. We've also got derived ones. So we've got offense, which is what you use to attack. So coordination plus courage divided by 2. We've got deception, courage plus charm divided by 2. Used to bluff, con, lie, speak to people, that kind of stuff. Evasion, your ability to leap out of troubles. Your charm plus coordination divided by 2. Deactivation, so picking locks, diffusing bombs and that kind of stuff. Knowledge plus coordination divided by 2. Life level, which is general hit points, is physical strength plus willpower divided by 10. And we've got other things, movement values, hand-to-hand combat values, wrestling values, surprise values, etc. Now, these are generally used according to the rules for each thing you're trying to do. But we've also got a bunch of knowledge skills here. So if we go on a couple of pages, we've got areas of knowledge. Now during character creation, you're going to be rolling a bunch of these, which are your superior areas of knowledge. Now these are rated on a rating of 51 to 130. So while it might look percentile, they're not. But if you wanted to use it as a percentile thing, just to figure out what your character knew, or your games master was going to allow that, even though there's no rules for that, based on the difficulty of the thing you're trying to know, the games master could add a modifier, so saying a penalty for something quite difficult to know of 30. So reducing your skill by 30 and rolling percentile dice against that. Still would leave some people a very high chance of knowing it if they'd rolled particularly well during character creation. But if they've rolled very well, then they deserve that. But these are generally used for conning people or speaking to people. So going on a few pages again. To page 13. We've got contacts, and it's got contact methods. So if you're attempting to force somebody, physical strength plus hand-to-hand weapon value, you're going to be rolling on a table on the next page. Fooling someone, using knowledge first, then specific area of knowledge. And other ones, fascinating someone's charm, dazzling's coordination, scaring them's courage, impressing's offense, con is deception, lure is evasion, and bribe is a cash value divided by willpower of contact. So you can try to just give them cash to overrule their willpower. And then we've got this table. So this is based on the agent's trait value, so whichever trait you're using, plus whatever bonus you're getting, against the contact's trait value. Now, in the adventure, there's a bunch of NPC values, so we're going to use them. So, on this page, page 21 of the adventure, we've just got random tables here. The first one has a knowledge of 82. The second one has 84. Now, we'll say the agent has a random skill of 60, because that'll be fairly easy to work out. So, 60 plus the 82 comes to 142 against 84. So, looking down here, 142 is this column, against 84 is over here, which comes across as a D. And we've got the reaction tables here. And a D is contact will listen to the agent, and 50% of the time, 0, 1 to 50 on a percentile die, will try to answer anything the agent asks. And we've got variants here up to really bad, where they decide to just engage in combat, and really good, contact will listen and try to answer anything the agent asks and try to do anything he requests. So, let's clear off. Let's roll And 51. So the contact will listen to the agent, but they won't answer everything that they ask, because we roll particularly badly, or not so lucky. Continuing on to individual ones, if I go quite far through the rules, we've got things like security systems here. Now, a security system, when you're trying to do that, is based on your decryption skill, your D1, whichever it is, which this character has 48. And you're rolling against the lock. So let's say he's trying to open a safe, which has a rating of 25 to 60. Let's put it at the high end, 60. So he's got 48, it's got 60, which means it's beaten him by 12. So you're taking that 12 away from his skill. So he has a 36% chance of success. So we roll again. Roll a 72, he fails to unlock it, but he can attempt. And we've got other things here, forced entry, where you're attempting to kick a door open. Multiple people can work together on that, and we've got target numbers for it. We've got explosives, how to handle that, underwater combat, etc. All of the different tasks have different rules, and you'll be rolling slightly different for all of them, but they're all going to be based on your traits, but specific ones. So, initiative. Well, basically it's based on your offence trait. If we go back to page 19 of the rules, we can see first shot determination, because we're going to be doing projectile combat basically to work this out, to get us through our first session of the game. And it says it's using your offence skill, so whoever's got the highest goes first. So, with the first two characters here, their offence skill, one has 88, one has 90. So the second character is going to go first. But in the first round of combat, you've got various things. So first phase weapon is drawn only. So if you're drawing a weapon, it will modify your offence down for initiative. If you're pulling it out of an ankle holster, it's minus 16. If you're just pulling it out of a hip holster, it's minus 4. You've got surprise factors taken into it. But every other round, you've got things based on aiming. So if you're firing normal, or if you're just firing from the hip, you get a bonus to your speed. We've also got things like weapon speeds and whether you're moving, how it affects it as well. So the initiatives can change each round based on what you're doing. And everybody just gets one action, but every round you're going to be determining who goes first based on what they're doing and how that modifies their offence skill. And there's no dice involved in rolling it, it's just a matter of whoever has the highest value goes first. Now for shooting somebody, you're going to be using your offence trait, but you get a bonus off your weapon. So if we turn over the page to page 21, we can see some guidance here to using the weapons chart. And let's say that our character, the first one on here, with his offensive skill of 88, is firing a Walther PPK, which is weapon H here, quick reference code, which has a PWV, a projectile weapon value, of 37. So his 88 plus 37 gives him 125. So he has a 125% chance of hitting something. However, it has different range modifiers. So first of all, we've got point blank. The 0 modifier for point blank for the PBK, which is 0 to 1 meters. For short range, which is 2 to 15 meters, we have a minus 45. So he has an 80% chance of hitting. And at medium range, it's a minus 145, and medium range is 16 to 190 meters. So still fairly short range, and that would leave him with a minus 20%. It's possibly good hit though, because there are other modifiers involved. If we flick on a couple of pages, we have hit determination charts. So based on whether the person shooting is moving, if they're running, dodging about, they get a minus 30 to their skill. But if they're stationary and prone, they've got a plus 5. If the target's moving, there's various penalties to hitting them. If you're wounded, you've got penalties. But you've also got things like if you're resting your weapon on a solid object, you've got plus 10. Using gyro ammunition, plus 10. But there's minuses for firing two weapons, hip shooting, firing second shots, and things like that. We also get penalties for firing automatic weapons per bullet fired. So the first shot is no penalty, and the second shot's minus 11%, and depending on whether it's a submachine gun or a semi-automatic weapon, third shot's 22 or 21 penalty, going on and so forth up to your 10th shot plus, where it's minus 200 and minus 180 to your skill. But let's ignore all of those. Let's just say there's a target 10 meters away that he's shooting at with his Walther PPK. So he gets the bonus for the weapon, he gets a subtraction for the range, so he's got an 80% chance of hitting. So we're just going to be rolling percentile dice against 80%. And we roll 83, so he misses. But for the rest of this, we'll assume that he hit. But before we go on to damage, hand-to-hand combat. Well, hand-to-hand combat works in basically the same way. You're going to be using your offense value, but it's going to be modified. But there's a lot more to it. Because if we go on to page 27 here, we've got hand-to-hand combat. You can struggle over possessing an item, so if somebody's trying to grab a gun off somebody else, there's rules for that. But we've got different combat results based on tables, based on your maneuvers. So if you're doing a slap to the head and neck, you've got different effects here. And we've got other things like wrestling holds, judo throws, etc., boxing, swordplay, combat tables. But it all comes down to the combat results here, where you do damage, or there's things like you can hold somebody. The attacker keeps the advantage against a plus 100 to his or her offense value for the following hold only. So you're pinning somebody and you can get more hits in because they're pinned. And you've got all of these effects here, injury modifiers, percentile dice rolls for light damage, moderate damage, severe damage, all based on these tables. But it gets a little complex for early adventures where you just want to get through it until you've mastered the rules. I'd stick to gunplay because it's far more simple. And so damage. Well, we're going back to page 25. And we have general injury determination, where we're rolling percentile to work out where we're hit. Now this uses a similar rule to a number of other early games, where if you hit somebody in a location which is protected, so you're shooting somebody through a window and you hit them in the foot, well obviously you couldn't because there's a wall in front of their foot. So that attack does no damage. A rule I really like. But generally when you hit somebody, you'll be damaging them. You then have to roll on the table below for the type of wound, for abrasion through to internal damage. And then you roll another d10 to determine whether it's a light wound or a serious wound, doing different amounts of damage. So let's go through. So we're rolling a d100 to determine where we'll be hitting, 22. So we're hitting them in the left arm. So even if we were shooting them through a window, which we hadn't mentioned at all, we'd have been hitting them. So we've hit them in the left arm. Now we roll a d10. And we roll a 4. So we've done an incision. And then we roll another one. And we get a 9. So it's a serious incision doing 4 points of damage. So what does that 4 points actually mean? Well, if you remember at the start when we went through the derived traits, life levels was one of those, but it was the one which was determined by dividing by 10. So you're adding 2 of your percentile stats together and then dividing by 10. So it's going to be a level between 1 and 20. Probably on the higher level of that, because you are a spy, so you have higher levels of traits. But 4 points probably isn't going to kill you. Let's have a look at the sample character. So we were attacking the second one. He has a life level of 17. So he's only taken 4 hit points, basically, damage. And so he's not in danger of dying. If he goes down to 0, then he's unconscious or dying. But there are further effects. If we go on to page 46, we've got temporary losses. So he took an incision serious to his other arm. So now he has 1 point off his percentile for his physical strength and 4 points off his coordination, with that hand because he's taken an incision to it. Now, if he'd taken damage to the head, there's chances of further things. So if it's a fracture to the head, you've got a 10% chance of blindness, a 5% chance of deafness, 50% chance of unconsciousness, and so on and so forth. There's special effects for damage to the head. Also, these are temporary losses which go away when that wound's healed. However, it can lead to permanent damage because your character isn't regenerative. They can pick up lots of wounds which do effects, but in this case it's probably not going to do much because of an incision, and only 10% of that loss is permanent. So there was a single point loss, only 10% of that was permanent, so he has a very tiny amount which his stat is reduced with in that limb. And likewise his coordination won't have been reduced at all. But if he'd taken several incisions to that arm, picked up a few wounds, then he might have a certain stiffness or damage in that limb which would cause him difficulty in using it in the future. Oh, advancement. Well, Top Secret uses experience points, but it uses them in quite an interesting way. If we go back to page 18, calculating experience points. They're awarded by adding the base experience points for the mission. So depending on what you're doing, who you kill, what information you steal, etc., they each have experience values. So the mission has a certain experience value. But for assassinating a target, so you gain 500 experience for assassinating a target, people in the Assassination Bureau will gain a bonus 100 on top of that. So they get to earn experience more for doing the things which is their expertise. Likewise, people in the Pilfering Bureau, or whatever it's called, get to get extra experience for stealing information. Now, the amount of experience you get is then divided by your level. So it says here, if you kill someone for 500 experience points, you're working with the Assassination Bureau, so you get 100 point bonus. 600 experience points are divided by 5, the assassin's level. They are awarded 120 experience points for the job. So the higher level you get, the bigger tasks you have to do, because small tasks will award you less and less experience. Now, your experience increases your level within those bureaus, which we'll turn up to in a second, but you can also spend the experience. So you keep track of the full value, which decides what level you are, but you spend the experience on increasing your traits. So if you earn 75 in the first adventure, well, you can't do anything with that. If you earn 50 in the next, you've now got 100 points which you can increase a trait point by 1. So you can increase your physical strength by 1 point. If you've got 500 experience, then you can increase 5 traits by 1 each, or 1 trait by 5, or whichever combination you want. But you can just spend them to increase those traits, making yourself tougher, without any limit, except for areas of knowledge, which are limited for players to 150. But everything else you can keep increasing forever. And it mentions that because you're going to be doing tougher and tougher tasks, to gain experience, you're going to need those. Now, turning back to page 7, we can see the various bureaus. So, Investigation Bureau, and the amount of experience total you need to go up levels. And as I said, really the only purpose of these levels is to divide the amount of experience you get. So the more experience you get, the more it costs you to go up levels, but you're earning less for those as well. So you have to do tougher and tougher jobs. A really interesting idea to ramp the difficulty of the game without making them the massive increases in level experience that Dungeons & Dragons did. So that's Top Secret. And there's some interesting rules in there. I do like the way the rules are laid out for the different things. So kicking down a door has well laid out rules for it. Picking locks has well laid out rules for it. Discussing things with people, conning them, etc. The rules are all quite well done, even though they all work slightly differently which I find problematic because I don't like looking up the rulebook. You would constantly be looking up the rulebook in this game. But the thing I absolutely adore is the experience, because it allows you to start characters at level 1 with advanced groups. Because the amount of experience the other characters are earning is getting divided by their level, whereas a starting character is not getting it divided, so will go shooting up through the levels, increasing their skills, increasing their level, to rapidly catch them up. It's a fantastic balancing job, which Dungeons & Dragons didn't really do terribly well. People always lagged quite far behind and were fairly fragile. But the differences between starting and advanced characters aren't that much in this game. But it's got a brilliant way of catching people up. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual. So thank you very much for watching as always. But most of all, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.